On today's show, Laura Heywood Interviews
the Phantom of the Opera himself. Ben Crawford is here. Welcome to Laura Heywood Interviews. I'm Laura Heywood, and he's here, the Phantom of the Opera. Ben Crawford, that is, who currently and creepily embodies Broadway's favorite malformed and maladjusted romantic hero. Is hero the right word? He's certainly the leading man, but that Phantom, he is a dark dude, and I cannot wait to dig into his complexities with the actor who brings him to life on Broadway 8 shows a week. Ben Crawford has been playing the Phantom for over a year, and I can say with authority, since I literally just went back to see him slay, pun intended, again, he's bringing the same freshness every performance that he did when he first took on this monster of a role. Believe it or not, the Phantom of the Opera just celebrated its 32nd anniversary on Broadway. Only 16 actors have been cast as the Phantom in that time, so this is an elite club. It is an unparalleled delight to welcome to Laura Heywood Interviews, Mr. Ben Crawford.
Hello.
Hi.
How
are you doing?
I'm fantastic.
How are you not exhausted from playing that role?
Oh, no, I am exhausted.
Oh, got it.
I am exhausted.
Did we get you some coffee?
I've got some. I'm
good.
caffeinated. I had one at home. I had one on the way here.
Good.
I'm restocking my caffeine levels.
Good. I'm glad to hear it, because that is literally a beast of a role.
It is. It's interesting because I have friends who will be like, you're only on stage for like 20 minutes. But when you are on stage, you're kind of at an 11 the whole time.
Yeah.
So I like to compare it to if you thought about like a regular principal role where you're on stage for in a 2.5-hour show, like an hour and a half, like compress all that into like 20, 25 minutes.
Right.
And then I think that's kind of the energy you exude as the Phantom.
Yeah, it's kind of like the difference between powerlifting for a few minutes versus doing like some cardio for, or like a light run. The difference between sprinting for 10 minutes versus going on a jog for an hour.
Absolutely.
Like which one hurts your body more? Which one helps your body more? Not sure, but
they're both strenuous.
Yeah, they're both exercise.
Yeah, absolutely.
I was really struck by so many things. I felt like I was watching this time around. I've probably seen Phantom, 10 or 15 times over the years. I actually saw Michael Crawford in it on tour when I was little. I saw him in both San Francisco and Los Angeles.
Oh, okay,
when I was like 10. And then
for that. Okay.
And then I've been back. You have a story about that?
Well, because my first introduction to Phantom was my grandparents who did a road trip. So I'm from Arizona, and my grandparents took a road trip with their friends to L.A. to see Michael Crawford in the show when he was there for like his first time leaving Broadway. So there's this huge connection, and then I was very young when that happened, and then I remember a couple years later, the show toured to Tucson, and I remember my grandparents talking about, and the chandelier fell, and it was so death-defying, and that was like my first toe dip into like the Phantom world, is my grandparents loving the show so much.
So you didn't go with them; they just told you about it.
Yeah, I was little. I can't remember how old I was, and I probably would have wanted to play with action figures instead of watching the show at the time.
We should say just off the bat, there's no relation between you and Michael Crawford.
There isn't, which is another great story. People will be like, your father must be so proud of you.
Does that happen regularly?
I mean, not regularly, but every once in a while, they'll be, or they'll just ask if we're related. But I have people who'll be like, your father must be so proud. I'm like, yeah, my dad is. Yeah, my dad is proud. It's just easier. It's just easier sometimes.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm sure that he is.
Yeah,
my dad really is. If they say your dad, Michael Crawford, then you have to correct them. But if they just say your dad...
But sometimes I don't. Like you said,
really?
I'm exhausted. And I'm like, yep, that's my dad. Like, just it's easier than explaining. Or they don't believe you. You get all kinds of fun people at the stage door.
I'm sure you have lots of stories there. But instead of asking you about those, I will say that it does offer, the fact that your name is Crawford does offer some fun publicity moments. Like this is a story about the PR for School of Rock, another Andrew Lloyd Webber show. But of course, the star of that musical was Alex Brightman.
Yeah.
And there was a press release sent out that said Lloyd Webber and Brightman to collaborate on new musical. Or something like that, and it was like it was not a lie, but I remember
a different way.
Well, yeah, I mean it was true, and I think that if it was like if you let's say take a break and then come back as the Phantom, then they can be like Crawford to return to leading role in Phantom of the Opera.
And just use that clickbait.
I mean, yeah.
Well, and that works with Alex too. Alex and I are buddies, and he writes as well, so that wouldn't shock me. If he was penning something with A.L. Dubs. No,
I mean, the wording wasn't collaborate. But it was right before School of Rock. They used it to get clicks for School of Rock.
Yeah.
I remember you and Alex on stage together in Big Fish, which I
Yeah.
also saw several times. And I know that you're sort of like an extended member of the family of Alex's little band of, they call themselves the Morons.
I like to think of myself as like the Joey Bishop of of the Morons.
Like the big brother.
Yeah, well, just kind of like the Rat Pack. You kind of like come in every once in a while and do your thing. I love those guys. We have a lot of fun together when we get to hang out. Yeah.
You have a lot of Broadway credits.
Thank
my
you.
friend, and most of them are not in the same sort of genre that I think of as the Phantom of the Opera, which I think of, it's got this very quote unquote legit theater Opera-y sound, whereas like Shrek doesn't necessarily have that.
It's a little different. That's I haven't done it in years, so that was really bad. But that is one thing I do pride myself on, is the fact that I have done a lot of versatile stuff, which comes from my love of theater and my love of money and hustling. It's the truth, though, in this business. Like, you have to bust your tail. And so I love the fact that I've played Billy Bigelow and I've also played Luther Billis. Like, I love that opportunity that I've had to be able to do that.
Now that I think about it, the Phantom and Shrek have a lot in common.
Well, have you seen that meme that was like circulating before I got the part? There was this meme that was like, idea, the Phantom of the Opera is done exactly the same as it normally is, except instead of the Phantom mask, it's a Shrek mask. And this came out like, I don't know, months before I started or anyone knew that I was doing, or even I knew I was doing the part. So at the time, Ali Ewald, she was my Christine, and she framed it for me, the meme. And then I can't tell you how many times people, have you seen this? Have you seen this? Hundreds of times.
Seen it.
Yes, thank you.
I love Ali. And actually, last time I came
people.
to Phantom, the time before this most recent one, you and Ali and Urel and I drank beer together in the dressing room.
Yes.
We had J.
had
Armstrong Johnson
Yes.
was Rel, and I happened to be friendly with Jay, and I know each other really well. Ali and I have gotten to know each other fairly well, and like you and I have been like socially crossed paths. And this beer came out called the Pint of No Return.
Yes, from Hardywood Brewery in Virginia, and they made this really yummy beer, which
Like a dark stout,
Well,
or
it's-
a dark
it's close.
ale.
It's a black lager.
Black lager.
Yeah.
I knew it was some.
But it has
I knew it was
like-
one of those beers.
But it looks like a porter or a stout, but then you drink it, it's a little lighter, and it has like some like Coca-Cola notes in it, or like soda notes. So
You are such a beer nerd.
I love beer. I love it.
If it wasn't noon, I would have brought you some.
No, it's okay. I have a show tonight. It's post show.
Post show. Yeah. I mean, there's that equity one rule. Aren't you allowed to have?
There is.
And also, it's 8 hours before your show tonight.
Well, that's true. I would be fine. But yeah, it's they do have the equity one. I've done that a couple times in this, but the alcohol dries everything out,
Oh, yeah.
so it's not like the best thing.
One thing that I was really struck by last night seeing the show again was how much you do with your hands. Like there is some serious handiography. I don't know if that's an official term, but like the choreography of your fingers. And I guess it makes sense since you're only showing half your face. You have to be able to express yourself with your extremities.
Yes, it's interesting. There's a lot of, there's that whole like Svengali kind of thing with Phantom, as he's like, for lack of a better term, hypnotizing Christine, and there's a lot of, what goes into those hand motions and things like that. I can tell you that during my rehearsals, I had a week off to go do some concerts down in Florida. And when I was in my hotel room during the day, I was memorizing my lines for the mausoleum scene. I was memorizing where I put my feet during Masquerade. And I was doing the music of the night over and over again, just my left hand, just doing that night thing. Night. So it is a lot of that. I've had many conversations with our head of production, Seth, about fingers and things like that. And he's like, don't do the fingers there, but if you want to do it there, and wiggle, wiggle, wiggle. So it's like I have to kind of, work on that sometimes. And it's fun. I've been doing it now in April will be 2.5 years. So there's a lot of.
Oh, it's that long?
It's been a while.
Were you there for the 30th anniversary?
I wasn't. I came in right after.
Okay, got
it. So
it.
Peter Jobeck did that, and then I started in mid-April of 2018.
Oh my gosh, cool.
It's insane.
I mean, what's it like living in the basement, living in the dungeon below the Paris Opera House?
I mean, we have fun at work. I always like try and, I've been very fortunate talking about Broadway credits, being able to understudy leading men who have given me, been role models and examples, and realizing that there is this, I don't believe in trickle-down economics, but I do believe in like trickle-down attitude, and, watching the people who are in charge of the show or the principals, really that attitude kind of goes through the company. And so I've always known that when I'm, going to be leading a show, that I need to exude that kind of energy. So that is one of the things I'm proud of being at the Majestic, is that, we have fun, we do our business on stage, and then we have as much fun as possible off before the stage managers are like, you're being too loud. But that is part of it. And it's so, a lot of what is happening on stage is so life or death and, very heightened emotions. And so you need a release of that. You can't, especially doing it for 2 years, there's growth in the character, but then there's also, different moments you find off stage to see people and talk to them and, connect with your castmates.
You were first on my radar because of some of the roles that you have understudied.
Oh, well, thank you.
Because there's a whole film about it.
There is.
The Standbys.
The Standbys.
So do you remember when that film first was, like, the final edit first came out, there was an event at the Paley Center.
Yes.
A screening on the big screen. And
Were
then
you
guys
there?
did. I was there.
Oh,
yeah.
awesome.
And I stayed for the talk back, and I was like, these performers are so incredible, and they like sit backstage for hours, and we don't get to see them. And it gave me a whole new understanding of what it is to be a cover. I still don't know the exact technical differences between a cover, and understudy, and a standby.
Well, I can tell you all of them,
Tell
Lauren.
me. Can you?
Okay, so a standby.
Okay, I'm going to just tell you one time as Laura.
What did I say?
Lauren.
Oh, my God.
But you're tired. I forgive you.
Laura, I'm sorry.
No worries.
Swing and a miss. Standby is someone who only covers principal roles, but they aren't in the ensemble. So, like during Shrek, I was a standby. I was just responsible for covering the role of Shrek. So when I wasn't on stage performing, I was up in my dressing room or watching the show, most of the time in my dressing room watching TV, but did that. And then an understudy is someone in the ensemble who covers principal roles.
Right. So what is a cover? Is that a blanket term for both a standby and an understudy?
Yeah, that's kind of everything. If someone's like, oh, he's the Shrek cover, that could be you're the standby or the understudy.
Got it.
So, and then, of course, a swing covers a ton of ensemble tracks and sometimes principal tracks, and is like one of the most important and vital pieces of theater that there is.
Have you ever been a swing?
I haven't. I don't know if I have the brain to do it. I've been asked to sometimes, and I'm like, I don't know. I like being able to, well, not anymore, but I liked being able to cover and have that responsibility and watch and grow. It's very vital, I think, if you're going to be an understudy, that you treat it as a learning opportunity to gain something new, to find some another outlet of creativity for yourself within your own part, but then watching what other people do. Like when I covered on the 20th Century, I watched Andy Carl and Kristen Chenoweth work out these hilarious bits, but not only watching them do that, but how they worked and their process. That show was very vital to me to figure out my own personal process and watch them, for lack of a better term, fail at certain things in the rehearsal room, but know okay, well, that won't work, so we need to do it this way. And then Scott Ellis was directing, and he would be like, that's funnier if you do this. And just watching that process it's so vital, I think, if you're going to be an understudy and, you want to keep going and keep your creative element, what's the word, keep your performing abilities and creative intent with the show. You want to make sure that you are learning how other people learn as well, I believe.
That's really profound, actually. And I bet it's changed the way that you interact with your own covers.
Oh, yeah. You have to, there's four guys who cover, and it's always whatever you need in the dressing room, use it, take it. I'll tell my dresser, Andrew, I'm let them, whatever they need, it's totally theirs. I don't care. I want them to do well. They save my butt. They let me go do concerts. They let me go take time off. It's important that you respect the people who keep the show going when you're not there.
I don't know if the Standbys is available anywhere streaming, but it's such an important watch if people can find it, because I now, as a result of seeing that film and understanding the sheer talent that you have to be ready to go on at any moment is to be like to be primed. Like if you're going out and playing a professional sport every day, your body's going to stay in shape for it. But if you're only going to go onto the field once every few months, you could let yourself fall apart. But like these performers don't. They're like elite level performers who don't actually, who are hidden from us. And so now when I open my playbill and there's an understudy slip in there, I'm like, yes.
Well, Laura, fear is a great motivator. And that fact that you are called to go on stage and you need to be ready. I mean, I can tell you multiple times, and I went on in the middle of a show on Big Fish. I did both my understudy roles in previews during On the 20th. I jumped on with no rehearsals in Shrek. I mean, you just have to
As
be
the lead?
ready. Yeah.
No rehearsals?
No. You just have to know it. You have to. Where's Ben? He's downstairs. What is he doing? He should be up here. Well, he's rehearsing himself. He's doing the blocking on his own. Donkey is a chair today, and he's pulling the chair along on its wheels, and he's doing the blocking, and we should probably run that one thing where all the sliders are going and you can get crushed between them. You're like, great, okay. So we ran that, and that was it, and then I was on that day. So,
wow.
And vocally, it's all kinds of stuff. You just kind of have to be ready to roll.
I can only imagine the anxiety dreams.
Oh, yeah.
Did you have them? Do you still have them?
I haven't had an actor's nightmare dream in a while, but yeah, they're the worst. I remember one where we were doing Oklahoma, and I was Judd, but I knew none of my lines. And I was just out there like, I'm angry. And I don't know. It was just one of those where you're just like BSing to try and try and make sense on stage. You wake up, you're like, oh, thank God, my career isn't over. But
so let's talk about the Phantom, or as I like to call him, Eric. Who knew that the Phantom of the Opera had a first name, and it's Eric?
It is.
E-R-I-K, at least according to the original book.
Yes.
And this was the first time I knew that. Although I think I may have known it when I was 10, when I originally saw Michael Crawford, because we drove from San Francisco to LA, and my mom read from the original book so that we kids would have an idea of what it was. So I may have known at that point, but that was a long, long time ago. But so I was like, all right, so there's this crazy monster who lives in the basement who like kidnaps somebody and like expects her to stay with him, ? But then I was like, all right, who is Eric and what can I understand about him? And I'm curious as to how much you think of him and his humanity versus just like this creature.
Well, I think I can say this because A.L. Dubs has said it as well. He doesn't really like the book. So
I believe it's Lord A.L. Dubs.
It is Lord A.L. Dubs. But I've started to read the book. There's some great moments in it. But it doesn't really follow what we're doing. But one of the great things, I mean, it does, but there's different aspects. There's different character choices in the book that are not, I think, what we're trying to do on stage. But what I do love about it is the epilogue after, where it kind of tells you what his life was and how he got there. And, he was this kind of like an idiot savant. Anything he could kind of do anything very, very well. And he became the engineer when they were building the Paris Opera House. And so at night, he was building all these complex things like tubes to throw his voice around, and pulleys and counter levers. Like
one-way mirrors.
Exactly. I want him really grounded. I want my Phantom really grounded in reality and the fact. And when Carlotta croaks like a toad, he's got some kind of dissonance thing that makes it, when she sings a specific pitch, it messes up the note. Like that's
cool.
There's like I don't want it to be like magic. You know what I mean?
Because that's the only trick in the show that Phantom does where I'm like, what is he supposed to be supernatural now?
Exactly.
And I think in the book I haven't actually read it, but I think I read that in the book he poisons her. Like he puts something in her drink timed to react specifically to when she'll be hitting certain notes.
Yes. And that's a great scene too, because, he's in box 5 with the managers and, he loves Madame Giry because she keeps his box all nice, and then they're going to fire her and hire this other lady. And what happens is he drops the chandelier on the lady who's going to replace Madame Giry.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. By the way, Madame Giry clearly is not telling the whole story. I think she has a much deeper history with the Phantom than she lets on.
Absolutely. Well, Marie, our current Madame Giry, has a whole plot in her head. I mean, we just never react, but she has obviously like gone through, and she has. It's very character driven from a backstory about her connection, but we don't ever really have a moment on stage where we connect.
I want a full Madame Giry backstory, Wicked style, like the untold story of the ballet teacher of Paris Opera House.
Absolutely.
Because I bet it's because this actor Marie has this backstory that I noticed that for the first time last night. She was so evocative and like got me thinking about, I was like drafting fan fiction in my head about a romantic, like maybe she was his first protege, and maybe he taught her everything she knows about ballet and was like the angel of dance for her, and now she like aged out of it. Maybe the Phantom is Meg's father. Like I was going all these places, and it was because of like her line delivery and her expressions.
Absolutely.
And like she fears him, but she's the only one who truly respects him.
I mean, she has this incredible backstory, and one of the things that she does talk about in it is that she believes that as a young kid, because of his face, he was like a freak, part of a freak show. Mm-hmm. And one of the things she said is that she believes that she released him from his cage at night. Mm. So there is this connection. There was something there. It's hard when you're talking about someone's process in the backstory. You don't want it to, affect what you're doing, but it is a really awesome idea to think of, that there is this story there. And I think everything you're talking about is what makes Marie so great in that role.
Mm-hmm. I think it's also such an important thing about theater in general that with actors who come in to replace, they come in with their own understanding of the part, as opposed to just being like, I listened to the original London cast recording a bunch of times. Now I'm going to go in and sing it and like walk to my spots on the stage. Because for a show that's been around for 32 years, people can still come. And I felt like I was seeing a brand new show last night.
Well, thank you. We appreciate that.
It also feels so relevant in this era of listening to women. Like I was always like, I would definitely choose Raoul. He's so romantic, like so handsome. Like he just wants to protect her. And then last night I just wanted to scream at him. Like every time he was like, it was a dream, or like there is no Phantom of the Opera. I was like, believe women.
Exactly.
Like, stop it, Raoul. Like,
it's true though.
Come on. She's saying that she was freaking kidnapped.
Yeah.
She's been there. She's seen it with her own eyes. And you're denying this woman's experience? Get out of here.
Get out of here.
Act 1 was like, who do you choose, Phantom or Raoul? And Act 2, I was like, bye, both of you.
Go do your own thing, honey. Stay away from both these men. There is something now with what I think is very important in the time right now, is that we have our Christines are playing Christine with a lot of strength, with a lot of personal conviction. And it used to be on the journey to the lair, it's like you're pulling her down there. But there's a strength from Christine that she wants to go. It's her decision. I'm not dragging her down there against her will.
Not in Act 1.
In
Act 2, like he doesn't. He's like,
well,
you're
of course. But in the
me.
beginning, the mirror and come with me and all that stuff. And they, there's this. Sometimes they talk about how he's just like kind of taking her and she doesn't have a choice in it. And there's little moments, but she has to have that strength. Like, yes, whatever it is, if it's like a sexual thing, or if it's I want to get better at singing, whatever it is, she has to be propelled by her own volition and can't have a man force her to do something.
Yeah, and I want to say I saw Erin LaCroix, who is the alternate, and she was so incredible. Yeah. I couldn't take my eyes off of her. Yeah. I first noticed, like she first caught my attention. She has that first scene where she's one of the dancers, and then the new theater owners ask Carlotta to give them a private performance of the aria from Act 3. Yep. And Christine's face as Carlotta is singing, it's like she perks up and she goes, I know that song. That's the song that I've been practicing. It's like she didn't know it was in the opera, because I imagine the dancers rehearse separately from the singers, and like she just didn't know. And then she hears it and she's like, she has this look, she lights up like, I have a secret. And I remember I imagine she's very young, like being a teenager, and like the idea of having a secret romance, whether it's actual romance or whether it's something like having a new, like a mentor, and it just belongs. In fact, she has a secret engagement to Rel, and she has that same look on her face when she's like so excited about that.
Yes.
And I thought, again, unfortunately, like I got into a lot of sort of current politics in my head, but I was like, this is what controlling relationships start as. Like, I'm going to protect you, I'm going to teach you, I'm going to be the boss of you in a really kind of almost father-like way. And of course, the Phantom is very tied up in Christine's mind with...
Yes, he's more obsessed with, I think, the manipulation of her. There is an attraction, obviously, but there obviously with him, teaching her how to sing from behind a mirror, there's this thing of trying to groom her in a sense. And so, that the character Christine does have this massive growth as Phantom realizes that she doesn't love him, or at least love him the way she loves Raoul. And, it's kind of like first act, second act. We've got 3 months. 3 months, Michael? What is it?
The publicist is
I can't remember. It's like 3 months, 6 months, since he hasn't been there. And obviously he's been planning all this crazy stuff, and he's...
and writing an opera. Let's not
writing
forget.
An opera,
he writes and orchestrates an entire opera in those 3 months.
Yes,
I mean,
exactly.
That is genius.
Yeah.
By the way, you described him as a kind of an idiot savant, and it had never occurred to me that he might be on the autism spectrum. But I think that term is maybe a little bit out of date, but that the term idiot savant is like often a term for, like an outdated term for people who are autistic or have Asperger's, or and I think I could totally see that, because one of the things about people on that spectrum is that sometimes they have trouble reading social cues.
Absolutely.
And they just understand like literalisms, and subtleties of subtext can be lost, even though they're the most brilliant people in the world.
I agree with you 100%. I just think he's not understood in many ways. And what amplifies that for him is his face. And that because of his face, he's already not accepted. And then when he tries to speak and he has these grandiose, brilliant ideas, he's already discounted because of his appearance. And then because he doesn't pick up on social cues, he kind of drives himself into the ground a little more. Not meaning to, but that's, who he is, unfortunately. Like, I always think about him if he was at like a dinner party, like, God forbid, like something doesn't taste good or like something's overdone. Like, I wouldn't put any knives at the table with him. I mean, he's killed before. He'll kill So he has to have obviously an irrationality to him. But I think the big thing with him is you can't ever let go of his humanity. And that while he might be doing everything or going about everything he's trying to do in the completely wrong way, it's coming from a very human aspect, and it's coming from what we all want, and that's just to be loved and cared for. He does it completely wrong, but you can't ever lose that humanity that he has inside. And that's why when everything falls apart at the end of the show and he has that moment with her, I think if you do it right, you need this moment where he's just broken and destroyed, to show that even though this was all insane, what he was doing, it was coming from this twisted place in him of trying to find his own humanity.
Are you getting like choked up talking about it? It feels like you're like feeling this emotion for him while you're just describing it.
A little bit. Well, I've been doing it for a while, and you got to find your ways to connect to that. And, another part of obviously an actor's job is to find that character line throughout the performance. And everything is in the final layer. It all builds to that. And, obviously music of the night is very important, but that final layer is like what you need to work towards as the Phantom. Obviously it's Christine and Raoul too, but being in his like playground, in the Phantom's playground, it is very vital, I think, that scene has all those elements of like, showing his humanity, and yet, he's also a monster. There's a lot of things that you have to build up to in that final scene to, I think, make the show ultimately pay off.
Yeah. I mean, I've always thought of him as kind of a monster. I think that he is, in the sense that like he literally murders people. Like, that's pretty monstrous.
Yes.
But in terms of his physical appearance, it's very Elephant Man, you know?
Yeah.
It's like, distortion of appearance, quote unquote distortion. Like, that doesn't define who somebody is. That doesn't make somebody a monster. Yeah. The way that people treat you because of how you're different, whether it's a physical difference or whether it's, just like being a weirdo, like I think we've all been othered at some point in
Absolutely.
our lives
Oh,
and
yeah.
felt like
Yeah.
people were judging us for something that maybe was not at our true essence. And that, I think the easy way to define the Phantom as a monster because of the mask, what's under the mask,
Yeah.
is short-sighted.
Yeah, well, Christine says it in The Lair. This haunted face holds no horror to me now. It's in your soul, which the true distortion lies.
Right, yeah. Well said, Christine.
Great work, Christine.
And Lord Ale Dubs. He also, like, I wrote down, I took a bunch of scrawled notes at intermission. I was like, oh my gosh, there's so many things to talk about. And one that I wrote was, he's a monster behind the mask, but there's also a man behind the monster. And then in Act 2, it's like, well, there's also like a broken man behind the man.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I kind of think the second act it's kind of grown into like all bets are off. Like he has his plans and then they kind of start to, fall apart. And he's like, all right, well, time to get him insane.
The one moment that I think that switches, and the most poignant moment in the entire show for me last night, which I'd never registered this way before, so like brava to you.
Well, thank you.
Was when, okay, so I'm assuming that we're not worried about spoilers in the show, right?
Yeah, well, I was doing an interview once and they were like, don't say what happens at the end. I'm like, it's been on Broadway for 32 years.
Also, there are like 100 movies of it.
Absolutely.
Like, it's public domain, in terms of spoilers. Like, if we can talk about The Sixth Sense, which we can talk about
exactly.
the
We can talk about
Phantom of the
Usual
Opera.
Suspects, absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. Why? What happens at the end of Usual Suspects?
I'm not telling you.
Just kidding. Okay, so there's the scene when Christine runs up to the roof with Raoul because she thinks it's the only place that they can talk privately, and they have their like moment of being like, we're going to rekindle this childhood love that we had when we were, that blah, blah, blah. And it turns out the Phantom is up there and he's like somehow hanging in a gargoyle angel. She's an angel, actually, I think.
Yeah, it is an angel.
Also, I want to talk to you about you as an actor in that little capsule hanging from the ceiling.
Oh, yeah, we can.
But the Phantom watches this love scene and says, it's like he's realizing for the first time, he says, he was bound to love you when he heard you sing. And he realizes that it's his doing.
Well, because right before that, I gave you my music, made your song take wing, and now how you've repaid me, denied me, and betrayed me. He was bound to love you when he heard you sing. I created this, then he heard it, and you're going with him. And he's like, no, ma'am.
Yeah.
Essentially.
But I think that, well, and maybe I projected this onto you when it wasn't your intention, but I felt like the intention in that moment was like, I made my own bed and now I have to lie in it. Like,
absolutely.
How in the world did I expect to basically like create this butterfly and not expect her to take off on, and find whatever the next flower, like whatever the butterfly metaphor is. Like, if he had wanted to keep her, he should not have trained her so well.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh, fuck.
Yeah, he really is.
And that is what I think. I think it is anger at himself, not at Christine for choosing to go elsewhere, but at himself for being responsible for his own tortured destiny. And that's the moment where he turns into like the bat, like
absolutely,
where he breaks.
Yeah. Now, Laura, you're getting deep.
I'm super deep about it. And I was like, all right, this will be fun. I'm going to this show that I memorized when I was 10. And I know all the songs. I was like, suddenly, and I was like, oh my gosh, that's really poetic. Like, I didn't ever really see that as a hypnotism scene before. I was like, it's funny when for me, having memorized all of those lyrics, and really I knew them back to front as a child, I didn't think about their meaning so much. I loved the sound of the music. I loved the story, But the poetry of the vocabulary didn't really hit me. And I was at the 30th anniversary performance, and then I came again a year later to see you and Allie and Jay and drink beer with you. And then, so I've seen it as an adult multiple times, but it wasn't until last night that I was like, the idea of having your senses muted by an outside force and then like waking up the next morning and being like, I only remember bits and pieces of that. What happened to me?
Yeah.
And then thinking about this detail that I read about how, at least in other tellings of the story, he's drugged Madame Giry, and like maybe he drugged Christine too. And like, what is this? I think like relationships sometimes start really loving and then get to a point where they become sort of culty, you know, or like Stockholm syndrome-ish, where you love your captor. So I felt like Phantom of the Opera was more relevant than I've ever thought it was, and more like, and even more romantic, listening to the words instead of just singing them along in my head by rote.
Well, and it is that thing where it's heightened language, obviously. And so it's not Shakespeare, but it's kind of close. It is that thing where, you know, you have to paraphrase a lot to yourself. You're like, what exactly am I saying? And so once you realize that my big thing with this part was a lot of simplification of the text and lyrics for myself. So I knew what the most simplest motivation was to, you know, portray the part, blah, blah, blah. And a lot of that heightened language is so beautiful. Well, all of it's beautiful, but once you like simplify it and you realize like what they exactly want, then I feel it's easier, obviously, to demonstrate and to convey what, you know, Lord Andrew Lloyd Webber wanted it to be when he wrote the music.
So while your character is saying, suddenly your senses abandon their defenses, the intention is you are getting very sleepy. You know, if you think about if you're in a room that's pitch black and like the senses, like you can't see, and so all your other senses obviously heighten. He's got, you know, there's the darkness stirs and wakes imagination. It's like a sensory deprivation tank.
Yes, that's a great way to put it. Honestly, though, it is that thing where once you take away sight, obviously is very important with Phantom, with his face. You know, see me for who I am without your eyes. I think is one way to explain Music of the Night.
Yeah. What a fascinating dude. And this is the first time I've ever thought of the Phantom as like a dude. Instead of,
I appreciate that.
Like, you know, I think it's easy to be like, it's a Beauty and the Beast story. But like in Beauty and the Beast, at least in the, you know, popular Disney incarnation, like, I mean, yeah, there's a man under there too.
Sure.
But he's also like a literal animal.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of supernatural there. And I'm so much more interested in how this could really happen without any magic.
Yeah. And I think that's a big thing too that I really wanted to convey. You know, like I'm a big fan of the Christopher Nolan Batmans because they're so gritty and like in reality. And, you know, Bruce Wayne's a billionaire, but the things that he has him do, they make sense. So with a lot of that stuff with the Phantom, it's you know, I didn't want any like you said supernatural stuff. It's, you know, the portcullis moves down because there's tiny filaments that he's touching, like that are very, you know, who knows what they are, spider silk, doesn't matter. But there's something there's a reality there. It's not just magic that makes the portcullis come down. And, you know, I'd say one of the only things is like doing this to Christine where
he's moving his hand.
I'm sorry, I'm moving my hand. Can everyone see that? You know, when right before or right after silently the senses abandon their defenses, then he, you know, does that and she responds. He lifts his hand up. She lifts her head up. He moves his hand to the left. And of course she turns and follows where, you know, he's going. But that's also strength in Christine, that she's allowing him to do this. She's like, I want you to seduce me in a sense.
Well, I have mixed feelings about that just description of any woman at any time being like, she was asking for it. But
well, that's not what I'm saying at all.
I know. I'm like, I know you're not.
But in like a mutual relationship, yes.
Yeah, it's like ravishing. It's like, I want to be ravished.
Yes.
Which is in sort of like, I don't know why I'm going here, but like in like evolved kink communities, ravishing is the chosen terminology rather than like, quote, rape fantasy, because rape isn't a fantasy. Rape is a situation where you've lost all control.
Absolutely.
But ravishment is the idea that you want to, in a controlled circumstance, act out a part. Anyway, that's
But that's a controlled environment, and that's the thing.
Exactly.
And that's, I believe, is part of the thing with Phantom in Music of the Night, is that if she was ever at a moment, obviously didn't want him to do any of this, I think she would,
Well, she demonstrates that by like running away and being like, "Rael, get me out of here." But I also think that in that one, that never read to me as supernatural, because you've had voice teachers. Hasn't anybody ever like put their hand up and you automatically lifted your chin because you knew what they were signaling?
Yeah.
It kind of reminds me of like if you have a dog sitting in front of you and you've got a treat in your hand. If you move your hand to the left, they're going to turn their head. Turn their head.
Yes.
It isn't magic. It's just the way we respond. So that never read to me as something supernatural. I feel like I want Christopher Nolan to do the Phantom of the Opera, and like I don't need Lon Chaney. I need to find out
dark and gritty,
who this dude really was. Okay, now
Agreed.
let's talk about. Let's stop talking for the moment about the fantastical world of the Phantom of the Opera, and let's talk about the world of the Majestic Theater with Ben Crawford and what you're doing. How do you start your day? I know we've already discussed you alcohol dries you out, so you save that till after the show.
That's a post-show thing.
You also drink a lot of coffee.
I do. I like caffeine.
What else? What's your daily routine when you're not coming to studio to do a live interview right before you go?
Well, you sleep as long as you can. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's a big thing. I've started taking voice lessons, and my voice teacher was like, "How much sleep do you get?" I said, "Oh, I try and get like 6 hours." She's like, "You're insane. You need to get like at least 8, and maybe if you can get 10, because of what you're doing on stage at night. You need your voice to rest. You need your body to rest. So you sleep as long as you can." And then it kind of depends on like what's going on in the day, but there's a lot of like checking in vocally with yourself a lot. I drink a ton of water. I try and drink a gallon of water before I get to the theater. Just because it takes like 3 hours for water to hit your vocal cords.
How are you not peeing all the time? I guess you're on stage only 20 minutes.
Well, the funny thing is during the show, you have your pee breaks, and so you kind of figure out when you can. So there is like, I think now my body, I've been doing it for so long that my body's like, now we pee. now we change our
It's Pavlovian.
It is Pavlovian, absolutely.
You're going to be 20 years from now, you're going to be listening to the cast recording our songs come on the radio, and all of a sudden you're going to have to pee.
I'll just stand
because
up.
Your body just
I'll be at a
understands.
dinner. I'll be like, excuse me. I'll just wet myself. Who knows? But yeah, there's, a lot of that. There's a lot of, physically, I'm trying to go to the gym and do something. Everything hurts all the time, so a lot of stretching and that kind of stuff. Like before I came today, I took my allergy meds, I did my neti pot, I took my Mucinex, I took my multivitamins. I had 2 cups of, water, so I'm at 32 ounces already. So I know that I have, 90 something more ounces till I hit a gallon. Like there's all kinds of little things I have to do during the day to just kind of keep it running. And I notice if I miss things, if I don't have time to do that, and then you get to the theater and you're like, oh, I should have done that.
Yeah.
So,
Do you do vocal warm-ups before the show?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I do like lip trills, and then there's this great thing called straw phonation, which is, helps to isolate the vocal cords, but it also creates back pressure to kind of give you the proper space for like how you sing. And
did you learn this from Norbert Leo Butz?
I didn't, but I learned it from my voice therapist, and then now my voice professor or teacher has me do it as well, and it's because
Norbert was just telling me about it. He was here a couple of weeks ago talking about his new album.
Awesome.
And I know you guys you did Big Fish together.
Did,
maybe
absolutely.
he learned it from you. I don't know. But yeah, that's straw phonation is something I never heard of until a few years ago.
It's this new thing. Allie did it, and I was like, "Oh, that's cool." Like I've always been a lip trill guy because you have to use more breath to get your lips moving, so you're kind of activating the lungs a little bit more than just normal singing. And then Allie was straw phonating, and then I started going to a voice therapist, and they were like, "Have you ever heard of straw phonation?" And so we started with that and did it one way, and now seeing a voice teacher, and she has me do it a different way, and now I'm very environmentally conscious, so I have a metal straw.
Nice.
Like we're not, doing all that kind of stuff. So, yeah, it's a lot of like checking in during the day, and you can kind of tell in the morning if you I mean, there's been Saturdays I'll wake up, I'm like, I can't do the matinee, but I can do the evening, and I'll call and I'll be like, I won't see you this afternoon, but I will be in tonight. You just need a little bit more time to get the motor running.
Yeah, it's so cool that you know your body that well. And
Well,
I feel like you have to. It's your instrument.
Absolutely.
It's like how somebody with a saxophone has to know when one of those keys is loose. Is
You
it
better
called a
fix it.
key?
Yeah.
I just realized
Keys.
I chose the actual wrong, the totally wrong instrument because I don't know any of the terminology.
Yeah,
but I just feel like there's
buttons.
so many buttons. There's so many moving parts on a saxophone, you know,
Absolutely.
that it's not the same as playing a recorder where you're like, it's either intact or it's not. You
Yes,
know,
very
you've
true.
gotta-
You have to know how everything is working. You have to maintain, and that is actually something that Norbert told me. I remember we had this big fight scene at the beginning of Act 2, and so we would sit up and on the stage and hang out. And I was like, "What'd you do between shows?" He's like, "Oh, went and saw the girls, and then I went and I swam for a bit." And I was like, "How do you swim? How do you work out between two shows like this?" And he's like, "Maintain. Always have to maintain." And so it's something that's one of the pieces of advice that obviously stuck in my head from Norbert about maintaining my own body and things like that. Like I just had 4 days off, and we've already talked about how much I like beer, and I looked in the mirror on Monday and I was like, "Ben, you better go to the gym." So, you have to maintain and make sure that you're, keeping everything ready to do the crazy stuff I do, like climbing ladders and pulling myself across the stage and all that fun stuff.
I assume there are plenty of like tricks in the show that you're not allowed to talk about. So I want to give you full permission to say not allowed to talk about
The
that.
way the throne works is Broadway magic.
Yeah, that's fine. I wasn't going to ask about that. I am curious about, there are a lot of scenes, as you referenced before, about throwing your voice. I'm curious as to whether those are done live or whether they're recorded, and if they're recorded, whether you do them like on an ongoing basis, so your voice hasn't changed too much between when it was recorded and when it was live.
A lot of that is pre-recorded. The reason
Because otherwise you wouldn't have time to pee.
Well, and that's true, or change costumes. I mean, there is that other part of the Phantom where he always is impeccably dressed, which is another great part actually from the book that you get when he would go shopping, like he had connections to like a butcher in town, and he would go after dark, and he was obviously paying him very handsomely, as well as a tailor who would go in after dark and get these beautiful cloaks and tuxedos and hats and all that stuff. So
And quite a masquerade costume, I must
and
say.
that is a thing. The Red Death. Yeah. I
oof.
love the mask with the skull and all that stuff. It's pretty cool.
Oh yeah. Are you in there?
Oh yeah.
Because that's when I was trying to peek through the skull's mouth and be
Yeah.
like, is that Ben?
It is me.
And does he have the other mask on underneath that? And and I had great seats, but I also couldn't tell. And I thought that's a place where you could put somebody else in there and pre-record it, or even have you singing off stage. And that was when I totally thought you might be like, can't talk about it, which would have given me my answer.
Well, no, yeah. Okay, so here's the thing, because Michael Crawford was he just invested everything in that. He wanted, he had just got done playing Barnum, and he wanted to come down originally in stilts down the stairs. Whoa. And they did it for some previews. And then, instead of the smoke bomb and then you run off stage, he went through a trap door.
Oh my god.
So he had, and I don't know if
I didn't know you were running off stage. Good to know. Thanks for the secret. I'm tweeting it.
But the secret's revealed. But I don't know if they did the stilts and the trapdoor at the same time, but he went through trapdoor. He'd cover his arms up. He'd drop down, and his dresser would wait there for him. And when he hit, so he wouldn't bounce, his dresser would grab him and pull him out of the falling pit, essentially. So he would hit, and then his dresser would grab him. And
I hope they were both getting substantial hazard pay.
I mean, who knows? I don't know. But
who knew hazard pay was even a thing back then?
Well, yeah, exactly. And that's a testimony to Michael, just kind of going balls out, for lack of a better term, and being like, let's do stilts. And then being like, oh, well, that could be bad if I fall. I mean, I'm not in stilts. And I'm like, don't fall, please, don't fall. Because that is pre-recorded as well, because I can't, do the
voices?
Because I have that, yeah, when I'm coming down the stairs.
Yeah, well, you've got an opera in one hand, and you're using your other hand to sort of gesticulate and dance. How does the jaw move? Is it hinged to your actual face?
Yeah, so there's a piece of elastic, and then the bottom jaw has a place to support me under my chin. And then if I move my jaw, it just goes down with it. But they're afraid of the muffled sound that would come out of the mask if if you look closely at everyone on stage, everyone's microphone has been like pulled out of the mask and is like hanging in a certain area to
I call it the forehead mole.
Yes,
mic,
they all,
as opposed to the rent mic, which is on the side of your face.
Yes.
The forehead mole is like.
But you'll see them; they're dropped down a little bit farther, so they pop out of everyone's mask, so that they're still amplified and it's not a muffled sound underneath the mask. But with everything I'm doing, they've decided that they wouldn't. That's a pre-recorded thing. But that is.
So do you pre-record it that day before you go on stage to make sure it matches the timbre of your voice, or has it been the same for 2.5 years?
It's been the same for 2.5 years. It was a Saturday. We went into a recording studio with David Lai and Kristen Blodgett, and they kind of shaped what they wanted. We did a bunch of different takes, and then they kind of put it all together.
And the same is true for the the throwing your voice parts.
Yeah.
Have you ever stood in the middle of the theater and listened to your voice get thrown?
Yeah, well, it's fun, because if we're in the house and for a rehearsal or something, and there's the sound is in there getting everything ready for the evening, then you can hear the I'm here, all that stuff.
And you're like, but I'm right here.
But I'm right here, actually.
What in the world are you doing while you're hanging out in that angel for the entire Raoul scene? Because I believe that there's got to be some way. There's the second scene where you appear out of nowhere at the grave, and I'm like, well, he's not in there that whole time. There's got to be some secret doorway because it's at the back of the stage and stuff. But I have watched.
No, I'm in there the whole time.
The cross you are?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay,
I've actually thought about it. I'm like, can we do a
you have
ladder?
A chair?
No, it's very small. It's very, very small. So I'm literally like this. And
in a coffin.
I have, yeah. And I have the...
Oh, like it is a coffin.
Yeah, I have the
it's
skull
a literal
staff in my
tomb.
hand. And I'm just kind of sitting like this or this, depending on if my arm hurts. There's weird things you
By the way,
realize.
he's moving his hand from his belly to
I
his
forgot.
chest.
We're not televised. Depending on if I hold my hand up near like my neck, then that might give me tension somewhere, so I bring it down. Blah blah blah. But it's a small space, and I'm in there for. I go in there the scene before, and I just kind of hang out. And then in the Angel, it's the same thing. I mean,
do you have your cell phone?
No, we've experimented with things, but the performer in me is also afraid that I'm going to pull focus. I had for a while. They have these great little. They look like Game Boys, like Nintendo Game Boys, but they have like 200 like old 8-bit Nintendo games on them. And I bought one.
The Phantom was playing Donkey Kong in the
exactly.
In the Angel.
Well, when we were trying to, and then I was afraid that the screen was too bright, and so then. My dresser and I got some gels from the lighting guys, and we were like cutting it out and taping it over so it wouldn't be as bright. But then I just kind of realized it was obviously like taking me out of the show a bit. You're just trying to figure out like what your process is, what you're doing throughout the show, and I just thought I'm too worried about like this pulling focus.
Yeah.
So I just hang out in there, and that's a thing though, because that's a tiny space, and I don't have the longest legs, but they're not short, so it's interesting to figure out how to get in there. They've changed the seat for me, but the weird thing is you're like just sitting at this weird angle that I found the best thing to do is I keep my foot in one place and then I kind of move it halfway through. I've got 2 fans like blowing air on me,
really?
Like, cooling me off, so that is kind of nice to just kind of
so
sit
the
there
Phantom
and like
doesn't come out and like have giant sweat.
Well, I mean, and then that is part of it too. I mean, there's been definitely nights where you think about it, you're in all these layers, and I'll stand up right before the end of Music of the Night, and just blah 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 blah, like falling out of the prosthetics.
Oh, gross.
I mean, I can get grosser. I mean,
get gross.
Okay,
Let's
so we have
gross.
we have the bald cap that we wear. And then that's cut around the shape of our head and it's glued on. So it's sealed up. So any sweat coming out of my head is like, it's building up in the bald cap.
It's like blowing up a water balloon.
It is in a gross way. So you can like, on a really hot day, you can like hear it slosh around sometimes. It's disgusting. Do you want to hear another gross sweat fact?
Yes, I want all of them.
This is actually going back to Shrek. But in Shrek, I wore a fat suit, and that suit was 30 pounds before the show, and after the show, that suit was 36 pounds.
Ugh. Ooh,
Gross.
whose job was it to wring it out?
Well, thankfully, they didn't have to wring it out. They would hang it up, and they had 2 giant box fans. And
fans. I thought you were going to say buckets. Like
That's
to let it
nasty.
drip clean.
That's nasty.
Good thing. I hope you were drinking more than a gallon of water at that point. Actually,
that was
did
a
you know
thing.
a gallon of water weighs 8 pounds?
That explains a lot.
So
That's why I'm
sloshing.
Yeah, what I'm doing right now, guys, is like pretending like I'm walking very laboredly. Is laboredly a word? I don't know, but that's what I was doing.
What else are you allowed to tell us about the makeup? That scarring, that like skull. All right, well, stop me whenever you need to. Also,
Sure.
we only have like 2.5 minutes
Okay.
left. But when I was having a beer in your dressing room,
Yeah.
you showed me some stuff.
Yeah, the prosthetics. Yeah, I mean, there's a bald cap, and then after the bald cap goes the skull, and that's glued on. Well, actually, we've switched. We just got new prosthetics, so now the face piece, because it's more contoured to me, goes on first, and then the skull piece, and then Thelma, our makeup supervisor, she does all the makeup on it and applies it and like makes it look grosser, and then we do the alopecia wig. And then we do the Valentino wig on top of that, and then
That's like the slicked back.
That's the slicked back. Nice.
Looks
hair.
like maybe it could be your hair.
Well, I asked Seth, our head of production. I said, "Can we just use my regular hair?" He's like, "What are you talking about? You're crazy." So I've tried. Then I was like, "Can I get a black wig so it matches my hair?" He's like, "Stop asking me questions." So I try. But yeah, I mean that's how it goes on. The big thing is they don't want it to be seen unless they come to the show or people buy the souvenir program. That's like the big thing. So,
Which I have to tell you, I looked at the souvenir program last night, and it has been updated remarkably recently.
Oh, as soon as a new cast member comes in, they switch it up, and we have a photo call and do all that stuff.
Yeah, like it's got John Riddle in
It's got
it.
John in it and Megan in it. Yeah.
How do you pronounce Megan's last name?
Pacherno.
Okay, got it. I wasn't sure it was Picerno, Picerno.
She is,
Pacherno.
she's Italian, and I know there's some Italian. She's part Italian. I can't remember what else she is, but
Well, I know
she's a
didn't she
spitfire.
originate Christine in Love Never Dies?
She did, yeah. And then she was just Christine on the international tour as well.
Yeah, so she knows that role.
She knows that character
inside and out. And I cannot say enough about Aaron LaCroix, who's the alternate. Do not get bummed if you're scheduled for a day that
No,
Megan's
they're
out.
both. That's a great thing about the show. If I can quickly say, is that it's so brilliantly done. Where there are these little, people might call them like character holes, but they're actually allowing each actor to kind of open the role to their interpretation. So you get brilliant performances from Aaron or Megan or whoever's playing Christine or Raoul or the Phantom. It's because there's those moments to allow for personalization.
Well, I cannot say enough how relevant the show felt to me.
Thank you.
Especially when I reminded myself to stop singing along by rote and listen and watch and think about the man behind the monster. And you and the other actors are doing such a brilliant job of making it not feel like the longest running show on Broadway. I mean, I know that sounds like a weird thing to say, but there's nothing tired or old about it. It just feels... It surprised me how much I could love it and feel in the moment with this show that's been around forever.
Can I say one thing?
We're going to get cut off in 5 seconds.
Hal Prince always said, "Remember, you're in a hit show."
I love that.